Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Maybe the only live.
I think what we need to keep in mind here is we need new solutions. What worked in '88, '89, and the contributions of sport hunting to these countries was very valuable. Today, a sport hunter with a bolt-action rifle is no longer a deterrent to large groups of crazed militants slaughtering elephants with automatic weapons and poison. Times have changed, so we can't say that sport hunting is the solution. It is still incredibly valuable to the local communities and potentially to the nations involved. That's good. That gives them some incentive. But the other thing was there was actually a deterrent value because you had people out there who were similarly armed or maybe with ratty weapons who were, poaching the elephants. Now it is organized arms fanatic militants, which really needs some sort of, military or paramilitary response on the part of some of these governments, and that's perhaps, something to be discussed in another committee at another time in terms of what the U.S. appropriate role is in facilitating that. But we got to stop talking past each other here and we've got to find some viable solutions. We have to find viable solutions that go to people who have had things in their families for generations, and Mr. Young was, his usual dramatic self. But the point here is that, I read of one case where someone was trying to bring in a piano from Japan. Apparently we've now resolved that issue individually, but there are problems here with the way this rule is promulgated and its impact, but we also want to send the strongest message to the world that we're not going to tolerate this. Perhaps the gentleman who I mentioned earlier should have got a longer sentence and a bigger fine, but that's another issue. Are we researching a way for a test? We can carbon date stuff pretty exactly. We have all sorts of things out there. You got mass spectrometry. Are we researching tests that would make it easy for people to prove age?
We are researching tests. Unfortunately, the ones you've mentioned are among the ones that we can draw upon, and they are destructive, and they are expensive. They're destructive in the sense that they require some sample, some portion of the item to actually be destroyed in order to chemically analyze it. And they're not foolproof, but we can use them effectively to date things. It costs, right now, the tests we're using to date ivory, they cost us $1,000 per test, which is not too high when you have a major criminal prosecution, but it is very high for field agents to use, and it requires the consent of the property owner to permit it to be tested because it does involve some sampling. So there are limits to what we can do. We're unfortunately stuck in our law enforcement effort by our inability to distinguish readily between fake antique ivory and real antique ivory. And that's been used around the world and in this country by the criminals. They know this. They have whole factories that are set up to do this, to artificially age ivory, to carve it so it looks like it's exactly like a tribal carving from 100 years ago, and then to bring it into this country. That's exactly what Victor Gordon was doing. He was sending instructions back to his factories in Africa saying, make it look like this.
Where was the factory located?
It was from East Africa. I don't know where, though.
Okay. Did the U.S. government take any action to pursue that with the government involved, whichever government it was, to close down this factory?
I'm not aware of what we've done with that.
These are, we need to be reaching overseas in a very strong way, and that seems to be kind of minimal if we've finally got a line on, an illegitimate factory, mass producing this stuff out there. We should be using every tool we have to go after that country and close that stuff down, and doing that around the world, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, which is some trade sanctions against these countries, that little country and the big countries that are overtly importing. I've got to say, we just have to begin to think out of the box and come up with a creative solution. As we sit here and talk past each other, I think it's 4 elephants an hour that are being slaughtered. So we've been here more than an hour, 4 more elephants, unless they did another poisoning today and killed many dozens or hundreds, who knows. So this is something that begs a solution instead of a partisan, brawl, which is very usual for this committee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Duncan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dreyer, do you hunt?